Hello everybody, AJ Soccer here. It is April 4th and the banned and restricted list update just happened. And I figured I'd make a video about it since I made a video sort of talking about it preemptively with the Aaron Forsyth interview response video I did. And sure enough, I've Ugin is gone. We'll get to the other changes first, but let's talk about I first because I'm seeing in a lot of different places that it should have been Temple instead of I, and I want to clear up why that is a fallacy. That is just not correct by any means. It had to be I, and there are a couple reasons. The first is the simple fact that I is way better than Temple, which it is on two fronts. One is that it makes more mana on average because the Temple maxes out at 2, whereas the Eye of Ugin can make, 4 mana on turn 1 if you play 2 Eldrazi Mimics, for example. And then if you have an Urborg, it makes a 3rd mana for Eldrazi. And so, yeah, Eldrazi is good enough, powerful enough that it is far more likely that it survives in a state close or reminiscent to the state that it's in now if Temple is the ban rather than I. Whereas with I gone, it's still possible that Eldrazi can be competitive and exist, but the new Eldrazi decks will not look as much like the decks that were brutally oppressive to the metagame, which is why this banning is happening in the first place. Also, Temple at least gives you a feeling of exchange, right? I'm giving up the fact that this land is just a colorless land, whereas all the other colorless lands do stuff, Ghost Quarter and Tectonic Edge, whatever other colorless lands that you're playing to cast your Wingding mana, the Temple doesn't do anything special, it only makes this mana. So I'm giving up the utility of that extra ability on my land for the return of more mana. Eye of Ugin doesn't have that exchange. There is near no deck building cost to playing Eye of Ugin because your Eye of Ugin is amazing early, obviously, and then still does something game breaking late. It does something, has an ability that is better than most of the abilities on the normal colorless utility lands. So there's not that feeling of, okay, I'm giving up some value here for a little value here, and I'm building my deck in a way that utilizes this and minimizes that. It's not interesting. It doesn't lead to interesting deck design or varied play patterns in game. Whereas Temple draws, there is this sort of give and take to it that is generally a lot healthier. One of the main arguments that people make against I over Temple is that Tron is another deck that is clearly not oppressive in any way, that is greatly hamstringed by Eye of Ugin being gone. There is some truth to that, and it would be wrong to ignore that entirely. But there's a consideration that has to be made where Tron is not exactly dead, right? All that's changed is that your late game maps and scrying have to do something else other than I, because that's what I did. It was a one of that you can turn your land search cards into a threat late. That's still doable in theory, right? You just have to build your deck in a different way. Instead of using Eldrazi off of I, you maybe have to put some more artifacts, relevant artifacts in your deck and have your I go get an Academy Ruins that you're splashing. Or something like Foundry of the Consoles. You have to get a little creative with it. But generally, the idea of turning your mana cards into threat cards late with this one land is still a real factor in deck building. It may not be nearly as powerful, but that's a small price to pay compared to how much worse the format would be as a whole if Eye of Ugin were still around, just for Tron's sake. The other thing about Tron that's a little more subjective is that Tron is not good. it is a fundamentally flawed deck. So it being sort of kicked is kind of kicking it while it's down. Now, without going into why I think Tron is not good, that I can save that for another video. But also, Tron isn't necessarily a deck that you want to be that good in terms of metagame health. When we're talking about Eldrazi being too good, in that it was just too fast and greatly changed how people had to deck select, Tron is very similar. It's very glass cannon-y, it's very draw dependent, and it leads to a lot of non-games where it just has turn 3 Tron on the play, Karn one of your 2 lands. These types of games are not exactly something that Wizards is going to go way out of their way to make sure still happen in Modern. Tron is not a deck that is a good earmark for format health, and it's not a deck that they are going to feel that bad about sort of trampling on when solving another problem. So that's basically what I have to say about I, which brings us to the 2 unbannings. Well, there's also a restriction, Lodestone Golem in Vintage. I'm not going to talk about that now. Maybe some other time, maybe on stream, or maybe just read Danny Batterman's article that will hopefully be going up soon. I'm sure he has a lot to say about it, being a connoisseur of the vintage arts himself. But I'm going to gloss right over that and just talk about Modern. And there were 2 unbannings that happened along with I being axed. The first is Ancestral Vision. Now, Ancestral Vision is a really unique card because it is a 1-card game plan. When you have Ancestral Visions in your deck, without looking at the other 56 cards, I can tell you with pretty accurate results what that deck's theme and strategy are going to be. The other part is that it is a card that is almost exclusively a control card, which is a blue-based control card is something that's interesting, if only for the fact that blue-based control in Modern is basically non-existent. At certain points in the past, it has been clearly a very powerful, tier 1, tier 1.5 strategy. With Eldrazi out, I mean, there wasn't enough time really to see if the blue-based control decks could compete, because there were some blue-white and blue-black classic control decks that were going toe-to-toe with Eldrazi, but we'll never know, really, because Eldrazi had to go, clearly. The blue decks, for so long, were boxed out by Splinter Twin. If you were going to play blue, a blue-based deck with the most powerful blue cards, which are Cryptic Command, Remand, Snapcaster Mage, and Serum Visions, not necessarily in that order, you're going to play Splinter Twin. It's just the best version, it's the best shell to utilize those tools. Splinter Twin out, Eldrazi in, we have this huge shakeup, we don't really get to see how it plays out, but now Eldrazi out, Twin's still gone, so blue doesn't really have this identity thing figured out yet. What do these blue decks want to do? Of course there's Merfolk, of course there's Storm, of course there's Infect, but blue decks that use the traditional blue tools of counter magic, tempo, card advantage, card draw, raw card draw, we don't really know about what their home is going to be. And with Ancestral Visions being plucked off the banned list, we get a very big push from Wizards in one direction. Like, blue really wants to be doing this, you guys, because it's so clean. It's really just like shing, like super sharp and clean what Ancestral does. I wish I had better language to explain it to you, but if you've played with Ancestral Visions or played against it, you know what it means as a card in terms of deck building and play patterns. It's a lot of turn 1 suspend Ancestral and then do as best I can to stay on parity with you. I'm going to trade my cards 1 for 1 or slightly worse. I'm going to try and hit my land drops as best I can and keep my life total relatively high, keep myself on board as close to parity as I can get. I'll probably give up a little grounds, but as close to parity as I can get. and then whom turn 4 comes around, the big card advantage comes into play. Now I can start trading down to regain the grounds that I've given up on board, or in terms of life total, and then turn the corner, maybe with another Ancestral Visions, maybe just with raw sort of Cryptic Command, Snapcaster, snowbally value that happens in that mid stage of the game that coincidentally lines up with your Ancestral Resolving. That is a play pattern we haven't seen in Modern in years, if ever, really, because of this boxing out of blue strategies from Splinter Twins. So that's really, really interesting. Now, some people are afraid that it might be too good, which is a natural fear for anything coming off of a banned list. I personally feel that pretty much no cards need to be unbanned, which I know is a little controversial. People get really emotionally attached to things, or just think that, we have the tools for different healthy metagames and solutions to problems if Wizards will just give us access to them. And there is some truth to that, but there's also a lot of truth behind my reasoning for why I think that unbannings are mostly needlessly risky. But again, that's another video for another time. For now, we're talking about Ancestral specifically. People are a little afraid because it is super, super sweet. It's just a really powerful card. 1 card for 3 cards, only a mana, is a good deal. That's a good rate. And when you're talking about cards that exchange resources, you turn cards into life with the Philosophy of Fire, or you turn mana into cards, or, your land drop into card advantage, or with a bounce land, or anytime you're talking about exchanging one resource for another, hoping to gain an edge tactically or materially through that, sort of generating arbitrage through exchanging resources for resources. Card draws, traditionally you're investing mana, which is not affecting the board at all, and cards, you're playing your card draw spell for more cards. Ancestral is interesting because 1 mana for 3 cards is obviously way too good of a rate, and 1 card for 3 cards is way too good of a rate. But the resource that you're giving up is time. And time is a very relativistic type of resource. It's a very dynamic resource, right? 4 turns could be gravy. It could be free to give up if you're playing draw go anyway. Or it could be the most taxing resource. You would rather give away more cards or more of your life total or more mana. You'd rather give any other type of resource other than time, because you don't have enough of it because you're under so much pressure. So evaluating time in terms of exchange rates of resources is a really hard thing to do, and it's a really unique thing to do. And suspend cards are very good at exactly that. That's going to be really interesting to see. As for people that are afraid that Ancestral is going to be too good, there are a couple of sort of counter arguments to exactly that. Basically, the game has changed. Ancestral Visions is from Time Spiral, which came out, 9 years ago, 8 years ago, a long, long time ago. And the game is very, very different than it was. The way in which you exchange resources, especially on board, is not as clean and efficient as it used to be. The creatures used to be worse, and the removal was more mana efficient. That when I talked about that sort of game type Ancestral Visions scripts out for you, it is no longer as easy to execute that script as it was the first time around. There are a couple other factors, which are a lot of times one of the ways that you would utilize your extra cards and less time was with something like Chrome Mox. You would give up a card now to not fall far behind and be ahead in mana so I can keep up on board, and I'll recoup that loss of card advantage later cleanly and easily as long as I can maintain parity. And with Chrome Mox gone, that's not really a possibility anymore. Also, blue is almost defined in Modern today by Snapcaster Mage, and Ancestral Visions does not like to play with Snapcaster Mage at all. They do not get along. They are not buddies. They are sworn enemies. But they will still be played in the same deck, but that anti-synergy of, oh, this is my card draw spell, and this is my sort of utility resource card advantage card. These are the two of the most powerful things that I'm doing, and they don't work well together at all. That is a cool deck building puzzle in and of itself. And how many cards can you play like Serum Visions? After Serum Visions and Ancestral Visions, you know, are you going to play your Sleight of Hand or your Thought Scour or your Gitaxian Probe to make your Snapcaster good? Well, those cards are just more air for your Ancestral to brick onto once it goes off, and then your Snapcasters are just cycling air through air, and you're not gaining any actual traction despite looking like you have a lot of velocity. You're just spinning your wheels. It's dynamic, it's interesting, it's cool, and it's not overpowered. A lot of decks will have a decided advantage on board or constructed a game plan that, you know, 3 cards ain't that big a deal once I already have Tron online, to give you a bad example. But you know, it's just not the same. It's not as scary as you would think. And if we're talking about specifics, I mentioned Chrome Mox as a specific. That is a card that I absolutely loved playing with Ancestral, and you don't have to worry about that. And the other is Remand. Remand is super, super good right now. The Velocity cards are really, really good right now. And Snapcaster Mage makes Remands compounded, and Remand plays amazingly against Ancestral Visions, and not that great with it, because you're not actually exchanging cards. With Ancestral Visions script, you'd much rather play with Mana Leak than Remand, you know, in a vacuum. But with Snapcaster Remand being there, Ancestral is a lot less tempting, because getting that thing remanded is really, really backbreaking, and it's not one of those cards that you can protect with your own remand from, you know, counter magic or something like a Notion Thief, you know, something new, some other angle of attack onto Ancestral Visions that we haven't seen yet, because I mean, we've been shaken up so many times. Splinter Twin, Eldrazi, and now Eldrazi gone and Visions coming in. There's so much going on that there's a lot of time to watch it develop, and I'm almost positive that Ancestral is going to be playable, maybe, but safe. Definitely safe. And if it's not, then you reban it. Not a big deal. There's not a lot of like Cascade stuff. There's no Shardless Agent. There's no way to sort of manipulate the top of your deck to abuse it with Cascade. If you're gonna play a bunch of Cascade stuff, you're gonna do it with Living End and not Ancestral Visions. So yeah, I think Ancestral is awesome, and it pushes control or combo control, which were the archetypes that were greatly lacking in Modern in terms of representation. The last card that came off the ban list is Sword of the Meek. Now this is a card that is used in conjunction with Thopter Foundry, where every mana that you pay turns into a 1/1 and a life, because you sacrifice the sword, it gives you a 1/1 which triggers to bring back the sword attached to the 1/1. You pay another mana, sacrifice the sword, make a 1/1, etc. Now, this was an extremely powerful interaction in Old Extended, but it's a different world. Again, so much time has passed, and back then, we didn't have things like Abrupt Decay being, you know, a normal addition to decks. Kolaghan's Command, which is a super powerful card that's going to see more and more play. Every single deck has some form of artifact destruction or artifact disruption in their sideboard because of affinity anyway. The Pithing Needles and Stony Silences, Shatter Storms, Shattering Sprees, Creeping Corrosion, Fracturing Gust, Destructive Revelry, Smash to Smithereens, Smelt, Oxidize, Ancient Grudge, Seal of Primordium, Kasali Pride Mage, Reclamation Sage, Court of Calling for those cards. Everybody has ways to break up artifacts or mess with them somehow already. That's not even to mention the graveyard hate cards. Rest in Peace did not exist the first time that Thopter Depths was a thing. Thopter Depths being the main deck that used Thopter Foundry, sort of a meat combo. So, Rest in Peace, Scavenging Ooze, all of the relics that are everywhere, these are all cards that people already are playing in their sideboards. It's not like, oh, now there's sort of the Meek running around, I have to add these cards to my board. They're already there. You already have answers to these cards in your sideboards. So there's that, first of all. And secondly, it is not nearly as good as it used to be. 1/1 flyers for a mana and a life is not going to cut it in a lot of matchups. The combo decks will still just kill you. The aggro decks will, be able to break that up and or keep you in chump block mode or keep you down on mana thanks to Lena and Arbiter or whatever. It's not gravy. It's not free wins like it used to be. It is a slow and disruptible synergy. I wouldn't even call it a combo anymore. It is an interaction that is profitable. Thopter Depths used Vampire Hexmage and Dark Depths in conjunction with one another to make Merit Lage and kill you very fast. Thopter Sword was sort of plan B. It was, well, I have these Chromoxes and these Thirst for Knowledges anyway. The spot removal and land destruction that's good against my other combo isn't good against this combo, so I might as well play it. The Chromox Thirst for Knowledge engine that fueled developmental step into the combo is now defunct. Chromox is not a thing. So it's going to have to find new homes, and things like Lantern, if they want to play Thopter Depths, they have to change their entire deck. And even then, that's a good thing. At least now they'll kill the opponent, whereas the iterations that exist now really don't bother winning the game. So yeah, there's plenty of things to be thinking about. Hopefully you took something away from this video. You can continue the conversation in the comments below on newmockgaming.com or on the YouTube video itself. Thanks for watching. I can't wait to be coming out with more videos with more thought put into them rather than just me rambling. But I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. If you go out of your way to build this deck around this Ancestral Visions that you're trying to get off, and somebody just Blight Herders it into your graveyard and makes a bunch of tokens, that is going to be so disheartening. And I really hope that happens to a couple people.